Hoy le damos la bienvenida en el 1er Conversatorio de Educación como Derecho Humano al doctor Ricardo Rosselló.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to Jennifer Gonzalez for allowing me this opportunity not only to make this presentation, but also have a conversation with the students about education as a human right. So I brought a little bit of a presentation. I'm going to try to go a little bit fast because the questions are the most important part of what we're doing here today. But you know, the subject was education as a human right, and I changed the title a little bit to good education as a human right. And perhaps as we go along through the conversation, we can see why that adjective is so important in defining this important human right. So to begin with, the pillars of society, there are several pillars of society, but the two most important pillars in my opinion and in the opinion of many others are health and education. Health and education, if you don't have a healthy society, you're going to have people that won't be able to work, that won't be well equipped to study or to go further along in their professions. And if you don't have education, then you won't have the capacity to maximize human development. So one of the key questions that we should be addressing today is, why should we care about education in general? Why is it so important? Now, many of you may have different ideas on the topic, but I had some thoughts that I wanted to share. The first one is that education is the real great equalizer. It enables people from different backgrounds, from different ideologies, from different walks of life to get the tools necessary so that they can go further in life and they can aspire to have a better future. Education also helps us improve society. If we don't educate ourselves, if we don't challenge ourselves to think further, our society stays in the same position, or it can even go backwards. It helps ourselves, right? It helps ourselves because, as you can see, there's a little chart over there that sort of, well, it's blocked right now. Anyways, it's a small chart, but essentially what it says is that your income, or the income that you're going to have once you're professionals, is proportional to the level of education that you get. And I know it may be intuitive, but it's important to see these facts. And these facts are from the United States, so they're about a third of the numbers in terms of income would be projected to Puerto Rico. But if somebody does not finish high school, their income in general will be a fourth of the income that somebody that gets either a professional degree or a doctorate's degree. So the more you study, the more you get educated, the more tools you have to further on your career, the better you help yourself and your family because you're going to get more income. And lastly, quality of life. This is a general term, but quality of life is important because it includes a whole host of things. Security, for example. If we aspire to have a secure society, the more educated people we have, the less potential criminals we have out in the streets. If we aspire to have a healthy society, the more we know about prevention, the more we know about our health and how to manage it, the more we know about doing exercise and so forth, the better quality of life we're gonna have. So everything essentially is interconnected with education. So one of the key questions when I was thinking of this conversation was, why have this topic when in Puerto Rico, for example, at least for secondary education, we have the right to a secondary education. Everybody in Puerto Rico has the right to a secondary education. But one of the things we need to see is, what are the results? I'm a scientist, and as a scientist, I try to weigh the evidence and then see what the results are regarding that proposed question. So let me show you some of the results in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has two systems, as you know. The first system is, in terms of the schooling, secondary school, is a private system. This is a private system, and the numbers in the private schooling system are very different than the numbers in the public schooling system. So for example, here's one that's very alarming. If you are a student in a private school, 99% of you are going to get the chance to graduate from college. That is a reality here in Puerto Rico. The problem is that only 20% of Puerto Ricans have access to private schooling. Now, when we look at the public system, the numbers are completely different. The first thing we see is that out of the 100% of the students that go into the public school system, 58% of those students don't graduate. So more than half of the students that go into the system don't graduate. And furthermore, out of those that do graduate, out of those from the complete pool of students that go into the public schooling system, only 1 to 2% actually get into college. So here we see in Puerto Rico that even though we have access, or we have the right to education, it does not necessarily translate into reality when we compare the public school system and the private school system. So here's an important question that we need to start asking in terms of education as a right, is how do we consolidate and compare what the old model of education is and what the new model of education should be. The old model of education, which we're still using in many of the private, on the public schooling systems, is essentially a concept of taking classes, going to school, learning some subjects. The new model of education that has prospered everywhere else in the world is a model where education is not only teaching you math or history or Spanish, it's a model where the emphasis is on developing the human resource. So we need to have these elements in context, because in Puerto Rico, we have to see if in the public school system, we're developing that human resource. And from the beginning of the year 2000, we've gotten a bulk of federal fundings to improve our public school system. But have the results been there? There are some results where Puerto Ricans from public schools have taken exams and they're compared to similar students in the United States. And what we see here, it's a sort of a summary of those results. But just to give you an idea, in 2008 and 2009, out of 20 students in the public school system, 19 came out sub-proficient in subjects such as science, math, and languages. So to answer the question, even though we've gotten a bulk of funding, billions of dollars in federal funding, in order to improve the current system, we haven't seen that improvement yet. Part of the problem is that we're spending the money inefficiently. Here is another figure just to give you an idea. About 86% of the budget in education, over $2 billion, is spent on payroll. So payroll is becoming, essentially sequestering most of the funding that's being used, and only 13 to 14% is then being utilized for school infrastructure, for novel technologies, for new methods of education. So when you compare that to other places, it's completely tilted in the other direction. Other places spend about 25 to 30% on payroll, and the rest they invest on education. Now, with that in mind, those are the problems we have here in Puerto Rico. And education has always been an important part in our society. But I would like to argue to you that today is more important than ever. Education is a key feature, and the reason is that the world has changed. Many of you were born into that change, but some of us were born a little bit before that change. Before the 1980s, we lived in a world that was not connected. We didn't have the facility to talk to somebody in China or in the United States with ease. And we lived in a world where information was secret, essentially, and centralized. Now we live in a world where people have access to information. All of you can check if any of these data that I give you is correct or not just by going to your smartphone and checking Google if it's correct or not. So what's happened in those years, in that 35 years after the 1980s, is that two major things changed in the 1980s. Number one, there was a Cold War between the United States and Russia. The Soviet Union collapsed, and openness between the world was established. And the second aspect was that personal computers became available to all of us. So this may, again, you guys were born into that world, but some of us lived in a world where personal computers were not accessible to us. And once you have personal computers, the connection to internet, and you have individual powers, then the world starts changing where the citizen becomes a more important player in the results of society. And therefore, education becomes more important. And I would just like to show you how important it is, and it's not something only, feel-good story saying that education is important. There's another aspect. There's an economic aspect to it. Here is a list of the top countries in terms of their economic development. As you can see in the top, we have the United States, China, Japan, Germany, and so forth. But this list was changed a little bit. We changed it to include universities as well. Not only to include countries, but universities. And if you allow universities to be on this list, you can see that at number 11, a university, in this case MIT, if you include all of their innovators, all of their CEOs that have come out of that university and what they have grossed, it would be the 11th largest economy in the world. Just a institution of higher learning. And that just goes to show how the world has changed. That goes, as you can see over there, the Russian Federation is slightly below MIT in terms of that economic growth. Places like Venezuela, which have a lot of oil, are 24th in the world. So they're much lower than MIT. What this figure signifies is that not only natural resources like oil or natural gas or some of the other natural resources that we may have in the world are potentiating the economy, but knowledge is potentiating the economy. Now with patents and innovation, you can potentiate a country just by fixing or just by working into the innovation sector and developing those economies. Economies like South Korea, for example, were in shambles until Samsung developed its company, and it's starting a push for economic growth. Other companies are doing it now everywhere else in the world, and there's no reason why we can do the same here in Puerto Rico. And one of the key aspects for this to work in Puerto Rico and elsewhere is to have sort of an ecosystem where you can have the government working with academia and working with the emerging markets. And here's what I want to talk a little bit about. The education system, the world is changing, but here in Puerto Rico, we haven't changed our system since the 1950s. And this is one of the things that your generation is going to have to deal with, and that we are going to have to deal with now. In the 1950s, we had a model that was apt for Puerto Rico. It was, It designed Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico had a special relationship with the United States that was unique in the world. So we benefited economically from that. We had cheaper labor costs in Puerto Rico than elsewhere in the world. The manufacturing industries were the center of the economic world. But now Puerto Rico and the world has changed. And what has happened is that the special relationships that Puerto Rico had with the United States as a partner, now the United States has over 20 different free trade agreements that allow the same treatment or better treatment than Puerto Rico in terms of its economy. The labor costs are much lower now are much higher now in Puerto Rico than other places like Colombia or Mexico, which have these labor agreements with the United States. And instead of manufacturing, the knowledge-based economies and the service economies are the powerhouse of the economy. So there's many things, and there's current situations that strive from this, right? Puerto Rico right now only has, out of 10 people, 4 people are in the labor force. That means that out of 10 Puerto Ricans, only 4 people are either working or looking for a job. The other 6 are not even trying to look for a job. We've already spoken about what it means in terms of your economy. The more education you have, the more money you will have as well. So some of those situations are prevalent in Puerto Rico. So in essence, my argument and my position to all of you that we can discuss when we have the questions is that this is not a matter in Puerto Rico. We have to take it a step further than education as a human right. We also have to take it in the context of good education, solid foundation as a human right. So what's the way forward then in Puerto Rico? Well, the first thing we can do is look at other countries and see what they've been doing. There's other countries like Singapore, South Korea, Finland, the United States that have had models that have been very successful, and that we can apply some of those models here in Puerto Rico. A few of the things that I think we should start doing in Puerto Rico is we need to take our education system, our Department of Education, and completely restructure it. We have money in our Department of Education. It's just not being used properly, and it doesn't get to the schools where it needs to go. We need to give more power to the schools. I think this school is a perfect example of empowering the school. You can empower the flexibility. You can use the resources better. So one of the aspects of vision for Puerto Rico should be that schools are more empowered and they have more access to use the resources as they see fit. By the same token, I think that we need to give people more choices. In Puerto Rico right now, parents are limited in their choices of where they can take their kids to school if they don't go to a private school. So what we need to do is see how we can empower people to choose which school they go to. With those two concepts, if you can empower schools to make decisions, and if you can make parents choose where they take their kids, schools are going to have they're going to have an incentive to be better schools, and parents will have the flexibility to see if a school is not working, they can change their student or their son or their daughter to another school. I think an important aspect in the discussion of education as a human right, not only here in Puerto Rico, but elsewhere in the world, is having internet as a human right. The United Nations has established right now that one of the aspirations for the future is to have to include the access to internet as a human right. Why is this? Because the internet is now one of the ways where we can learn significantly, where we can find data, where we can access different lecturers, great lecturers, and learn. So as a tool or as a vehicle for studying and for education, the internet has to be accessible to all here in Puerto Rico. Right now, the percentages are about 40% of the people in Puerto Rico have internet access in their homes. So we need to expand on that if we really want to empower education and empower some of the elements. Similar to that, I think we need to include and embed technology into the education system. I was just seeing today how you have technological systems embedded in this school, where parents are aware of what you're doing, if you're absent, what grades you're getting, all of these things. All of those tools need to be embedded into the education system. I see, in order to potentiate education over here, we need to decentralize the education system in Puerto Rico. And we need to visualize, instead of a Department of Education, we need to visualize a system of schools that can be different, that can go in different directions, and that can potentiate different types of education. One of the key aspects that we're not doing right now, and that I know it's a chief concern for some of you, is that public schools are open from the time that they're giving lectures and so forth, and then they close, or if you want to access the utilities from that public school, you have to pay for them. So one of the ideas is that schools should be a vibrant community center where children go to learn during the day, but it's open after hours as well, not only for the students, but also for the general community to go learn, do activities, learn other aspects, and do other things. The other aspect of this is the concept of reverse schooling and online courses. Reverse schooling, where teachers now become more of a facilitator and a tutor, and then maybe in home you can have learn lectures instead of doing it the opposite way, where you take the lectures here in school and do the homework at home. There should be an emphasis in early schooling as well. All evidence suggests that the course where people learn the most is from 0 to 5 years in their development. That's where the least of our budget is being accessed in terms of education. And finally, I think we need to incorporate what's called a multiple intelligence model. A multiple intelligence model compared to the current model we have right now here in Puerto Rico. Right now, we have an industrial model that only focuses on certain aspects of education, and anybody that goes beyond that sort of falls off the wagon. The multiple intelligence model creates aspects so that if you want to develop in math, there's a space for you. If you want to develop in the arts, in sports, in different aspects of vocational learning, you have a space to learn, and that we can develop the human resources. And the question is, why do we need to act now? Why do we need to do all these things right now? The reason is we have a lot of challenges in Puerto Rico and in the world. And those challenges, we can sort of groan at them and see them as something negative, or we can see the opportunity in those challenges, right? So there's many alternatives that are challenges here in Puerto Rico, but that can become opportunities. Energy is a challenge that could become an opportunity for development. Waste is a problem here in Puerto Rico. Intelligent design of aspects of our society. How do we manage water? How do we manage our health system? All those things are elements that only if you have a trained society, if only if you have great education, you can potentiate them and you can innovate in those areas. And the idea is that right now, we're sort of in the cusp of a changing society again. Like I said, when you guys were born or were in that process, computers were sort of, the technology was developing in terms of capacity. How much capacity can I have in my computer, for example? So when I was in college, the first year in college, it took me about 1 hour to upload one picture into my computer. When I left college, it took me about 20 minutes to upload a video into my computer. So within 4 years, the capacity of the computers and the technology grew. There came a point where now we have almost unlimited capacity, right? These smartphones, the first computer that was ever built was bigger than this room and had 1/1,000,000th of the capacity that this phone has right now. So the capacity has increased. In the next decade, the challenge was communication. And that's the decade that you're born into, right? Twitter, Facebook, and all of these things have been developed because we had the capacity. Now we have better communication. But we have already topped out in terms of communication. We can communicate with China, we can communicate with the United States instantaneously. We can do it by Twitter, we can do it by Skype, we can do it by different ways. So the next challenge in terms of technology is how do we improve our humanity? And what that means is how do we improve our quality of life? How do we improve health services? How do we improve security? How do we improve different aspects of education? And those are the questions that are at the heart of the challenges that lie ahead. So if we don't have good education in terms of our society, if we don't have an educated people, then we won't be able to facilitate and potentiate all of those major changes that are going to be ahead into the future. And you know, some of these changes, and I wanted to say, some of these changes are big. Some of these changes may take time, but there are some changes that we can start making right now, and that you can make on your own. And I had written when I was coming by, I said, you know, I don't want to lose the crowd, so in this Twitter era, I'm going to give you a couple of advices in 140 characters or less that I wrote, that I see from the world that's being changed. The first one is that different is better than better. We're living in a world where being able to differentiate means being able to innovate and to change things. So every time you think of something different, don't be afraid of it, embrace it. It's one of those things that'll make you grow and that'll help your society prosper. The second advice from somebody that didn't take this advice when he was young was to say, I don't know. If you don't know something, don't pretend you know it. We're here in school. It's fine to say, I don't know. It gives you intellectual freedom to explore. It enables your teachers to explain things better, and it enables the education process to further on. Third aspect, the third Twitter suggestion was that to find something that you guys do well, maybe you're great at math, or you're great at basketball, or you're great at something, giving speeches, and to try to see how you can change it and make it better. Sometimes we make ourselves feel comfortable with what we're doing, even if we're doing it well, and what we need to do is try to push ourselves to make it even better. By the same token, another advice is that we should find something that we're afraid to do and do it. We should make ourselves find things that are challenging to us, that we may think we don't do correctly, and we should execute them properly. So those are just a few advices that I've had from my experience in growing up. And my hope is that the rest of Puerto Rico, if having evaluated what you guys are doing in this school, the rest of Puerto Rico can learn, the system can adapt, and that you know, we can be as successful as the Carib Christian School has been. And I'm sure that if we can do that, we can not only aspire to have a better Puerto Rico, but we can also aspire to have a good education system as a human right for all. So with that said, I will be glad to take any and all of your questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we want to thank you, Dr. Rosselló, for accepting our invitation from Carib Christian School and from the History Department. And it was very interesting, so I am asking for another round of applause for him. So at this moment, I will ask those students that have questions for him. Please stand up. You can make a line on this side of the chapel.
Hi, my name is Miguel Alvarez. I'm 12th grade. First off, thank you very much for the presentation. Great. So as you recall, in 2013 to 2014, the budget for students was $3,000 more per student than anticipated. Why were there still problems for the student education?
That's a great question. I think one of the problems, I want you to think of this. Our education system has more money, just the education system, than half of the countries in South America, doing their whole budget. And some of those countries have a better education system than we do. So why is this happening? The reason is the money is not being used properly. So every time we have a lot of bureaucratic processes that don't enable that money to get to the students. Our suggestion or one of our hopes is that we can decentralize the Department of Education, so that the schools have the power to use the funding to impact the students greater, and then to not to not lose all of that money and to see results. The other second aspect is we need to be a results-oriented society, right? We need to see if we're going to put X amount of money somewhere, we need to see some results. If, for example, with No Child Left Behind, almost $1 billion came through to Puerto Rico. And the results have been zero. So what that means is if we had $2 billion or $5 billion more, probably the results would still be zero, because it's not about the money, it's about what we're doing with that money. And I think that the only way we can stop that is making sure that the money gets to the level where it needs to go, which is the schooling level.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Paula Romero. I'm from 12th grade. And my question for you is, the federal government grants Puerto Rico X amount of millions for education. Approximately 60% of it's invested on operational expenses. And no one knows where the remaining 40% goes to. This clearly shows the mismanagement of funds by the government of Puerto Rico. How do you expect to meet the island's economic and social crisis when so little or nothing is invested on education, which is one of the 3 pillars of society? How do you expect to get an output when there's no input?
A very good question. First of all, we get a lot of federal funds for education. They're destined to be implemented into something particular. So for example, a lot of those funds are destined to improve our teachers' capacity to educate and to give them newer tools to educate. What is being used for, unfortunately, is for seminars in hotels where there is no results on improvements on the teacher side. So certainly if we have a bulk of over $100 million being spent on that and we see no results, we need to change that. We need to change how we're using those funds and putting in based on results metrics. The second aspect, where you're saying some of the funds are not, we don't know where they're headed, they're being either misused in bureaucratic processes or they're not being used at all. So another key problem is that we get funds, we don't use them, and we don't do compliance to see how they're being assessed. So I completely agree with your premise. If we don't have an input into education, we're not going to get any output on the education side. And one of the things I just want you to reflect, read the newspaper articles on education. The last year, all of them talk about everything except education. They talk about infrastructure, they talk about getting kids to school, they talk about missing professors, but they don't talk about how we're going to improve the output of education. And that's a problem. If the society does not have a vision of improving output, then the money is just going to be used for bureaucratic purposes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Joe Morales, 11th grade. Please show that Puerto Ricans are graduating high school without proper college preparation and poor dominance of the English language. Is that a problem with our education system or a problem culturally?
Okay, so that's a good question, right? Why, if I understood you correctly, why is English, is the lack of English learning a systematic problem or a cultural problem? I think it's both. There's a system that's being used, that's being underutilized, and it's unfortunate, and we need to potentiate. My vision is that kids need to learn English, not for some ideological reason, but because it's the language that potentiates business, science, and everything else in the world. 100 years ago, it was a French language. So back then, maybe we needed to learn French in order to potentiate this. 100 years from now, it may be Mandarin Chinese. In that moment, we're going to have to learn Mandarin Chinese. But there certainly are some cultural aspects, and I think they strive on control. And we need to stop that sort of control mechanism. Why control? Because some may think that if you do not have the tools to understand English or to communicate in English, then you're going to have to depend on them. And so the cultural aspect of it, ideological aspect of it is a limitation. The structural aspect of schools not enabling this is a limitation. And I just think that instead of having this be an ideologic argument of I want to learn English because I am for the United States, or I don't want to learn because I'm against the United States, it should be an argument that we want to learn English so that we can communicate with the rest of the world. Just one example, South Korea had a protest from the students' parents a couple of years ago. And it was a protest because of English being taught in schools. But the protest, instead of being to eliminate the English learning in schools, it was to, instead of starting it from the 3rd grade, which they had started before, to start it from the 1st grade. So everywhere else in the world, people are tending towards English. We should take advantage of our position, learn English, and try to overcome those cultural obstacles.
Thank you. Gabriel Barreto, 10th. If Puerto Rico is spending about the same amount of money per student as the United States, why don't Puerto Rican schools have the same quality of equipment and other resources? We
spend about anywhere from $10,000 per student in the public schooling system. In the United States, it's about the same. Places like Florida, which have a much better schooling system than we do, is about $8,000 per student. So again, it's not a money issue. It's how do we use the money. The answer to your question is that most of that money, instead of being used for resources, for technology, for improving the capacity of our teachers, for giving tools to our students, is being used on bureaucratic and administrative processes.
I have another question.
Sure.
Why don't Puerto Rican schools have libraries of the quality as the ones in the U.S., and what can you do about it?
Why don't they have what?
Why don't Puerto Rican schools have libraries of the same quality as the United States, and what can you do about it?
It's a great question. Let me say two things. Number one, again, connects to the previous question. We are not using the resources on things like technology, infrastructure, things that we need to use it. But the second thing I want you to think about is how the world is changing right now, and that we can now have open spaces, not necessarily think about traditional libraries, but open spaces with technology that can give us access to all of the books in the world, all of the libraries that we may need. So if we change that, we may even have an advantage because we can prepare ourselves to have more modern libraries and more modern systems. But again, the answer is the same. Bad use of resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Eric Blanco from 12th grade. The Department of Education has said on numerous occasions that its cost per student is between $9,000 through to $11,000 per year. If we count the 450 students that CCS has and multiply them by the lowest amount, it would mean that we are saving the government $4,050,000. However, as an athlete, if I wish to practice my sport in a public basketball court, my school is charged a large amount of money for using those facilities. Do you support the fact that we have to pay the use of public basketball courts even though our parents pay taxes just because we go to a private school?
First of all, no, I don't agree with that. I think that schools, again, should be places that are used, not closed. I think they should be vibrant centers of the community. So what that means is that, let's say, we end school today at 2:30, 3 o'clock. You guys could go to a public school that's designed, that has the infrastructure, and either play basketball, have the space to learn how to do agriculture, get access to internet, and it shouldn't be limited just to students. I think it should be an aspect for all of the community, for parents to learn. So one of the realities is that, some of the realities are that parents don't have, didn't get the education. Some parents didn't get the education, and they feel a little bit left behind when their students are learning. They can go at those times and use the infrastructure that's there, that's money already invested, and we can use it for something positive. So yes, I think you should be able to use it without spending. You already do pay taxes. So our view is that these systems should be open for all society and should be overutilized to maximize development.
Good morning. My name is Carlos Reyes from 12th grade, and my question is following the same line of thought of the previous question. Would you approve or support that our parents receive a tax deduction or incentive because they have us in a private school and are saving the government millions of dollars each year?
Some of the things that we need to consider is the fiscal problems that we're having in Puerto Rico right now. There's certainly, you've been seeing them in the news. We're having a mismanagement of money. So that could be one of the things that we can do. The other alternative, which I think is a powerful alternative, is vale educativo, which I'm forgetting the English translation to it. But what this means is, again, if we want to give people choices, we need to empower them with something that they can make the choice. Vale educativos, what they give is they give parents essentially a stipend that they can use towards the education of their choosing, right? Instead of taking those $9,000 that are being spent or $10,000 that are being spent per student and just investing them here, you pass them on essentially to the parents, and they can use them to pick an education of their choice. So in a sense, los vale educativos would be a sort of an exemption because they would help, for example, your parents that are making a sacrifice already economically to get you into private school. It would allow them to use that tool, so they would have to pay less out of pocket. So, it's a good, I hadn't considered the other alternative. It's a good alternative. We need to see how the fiscal numbers align. But I can tell you that we're studying the other one, which should be as good or maybe even better because it gives back to the parents, and it gives the choices to the parents to put the kids in the schools that they want to be.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, my name is Pablo Cortez, and I'm from the 12th grade. My question is, what do you think about public libraries, and how and what would you do to open more of them to improve the educational culture within local communities? Because you were saying that you wanted to open more modern libraries, but the thing is that even though we have the technology to read a whole bunch of books in one single apparatus such as this, the fact remains that most of the books and literature that comes is still first printed into normal book format.
That's right.
Instead of PDF.
Yes, we need to stop depending too much on government. And I think in Puerto Rico we have a lot of, the view that we need to take, at least my view is that you need to create a government that's more collaborative with the private sector, more collaborative with the non-governmental organizations, and with the civil society. What that means is that I do see the space for that to develop. And there are right now non-government organizations that would like to potentiate, areas of study, areas where we have books. So you can do the infrastructure for them. What I would suggest that we can work towards is that other groups as well can become, NGOs that potentiate education can donate some of the books or can facilitate the aspects of putting these books together. I'm not against libraries. I am for libraries with internet access so that we can have, the traditional way of reading books. I still can't read through through one of these devices. I like to write on books and papers and see them on papers. So they need to be there. But what I'm saying is we need to do them in a smarter way that's more economic, that's more efficient. And I think the way to do it is by including non-government organizations, voluntary groups, civil society to help in building the resources for education once the infrastructure for a library is established. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think this will be the last question. I was waiting for my turn. God bless you once more, Dr. Rosselló. We are grateful to have you here with us today. So my question will be, as the general pastor of Iglesia Rey de Reyes and Carib Christian School, my question will be, as the next government, what will be your vision for a Christian school as Carib Christian School in the vision of the education for Puerto Rico?
The education system is as a system of schools, that they can have their own identity, that they can have their own, their own direction. So for example, you can take a Christian school, but you can also take a vocational school, or you can also take a school devoted to arts, or a school specialized in math and science. And you empower the fathers, the parents, to choose which school they use. So I see it as a facilitating space, because vale educativos are not limited to a certain set of schools. They're allowed, they're a disbursement only to be used for schools, of course, but you can use them in whatever school of your liking. So I do believe that the way, the vision that we're doing it potentiates schools like this and other schools that may want to develop such as this, but haven't had either the resources or the necessary help from government to potentiate it. The way I see it is we eliminate obstacles and we let the schools run as they think they should run, and we let the parents choose where they put their kids. Once you have that combination, you essentially potentiate competition, good results, and obviously better education for Puerto Rico.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Well, my interest would be, as a Christian school, let's say I will speak in behalf of all the Christian schools in Puerto Rico as well. What will be our position as in your government? It will be okay, no problem?
Oh, of course. I think, again, it's not, I don't think government should decide what works or doesn't work. I think, families have a key role in that, and families should have the options to choose between their preferred alternatives. If you're a Christian family that wants to give Christian values to your children, then you should have the power to put your child in a Christian school. The same way, if you feel your child is gifted in math and science, you shouldn't be limited to putting them in a school where they're not being potentiated to the maximum of their capabilities. You should be able to decide and give them the opportunity based on the merit of that child. So certainly they have space, and I think that this vision allows more schools of this nature to grow and to prosper.
Thank you very much.
And seeing that you have had the highest College Board results in the past 5 years in Puerto Rico, I think it would be good for Puerto Rico to have more schools like this.
nombre de toda la facultad, todo el equipo que compone Carib Christian School, agradecerle que haya tomado de su tiempo. Sabemos que son 2 horas para venir, 2 horas para regresar, que su agenda es bien cargada, pero cuando vemos que hay interés en poder orientar a nuestros estudiantes, que son el futuro de Puerto Rico, en cuanto a todos estos derechos, toda su perspectiva, su punto de vista, qué usted cree de nuestra educación, siempre es importante. Y sabemos que para usted es importante la educación, es usted un ejemplo de lo que un estudiante puede lograr si se lo propone, y queremos decirle que estamos aquí con las puertas abiertas. Cada vez que usted quiera escuchar buenas ideas, aquí tenemos los mejores estudiantes, los mejores maestros que siempre están disponibles para trabajar para un Puerto Rico mejor.
Muchas gracias. Un aplauso para ustedes.
Nuestro administrador, Badillo, quería hacer entrega de un detallito.
Agradecido. Ah, qué bonito, excelente. Gracias, thank you. Well, I'd like to thank all of you for your attention. I know I spoke a little bit too long, but thank you. God bless you, and my best wishes to